Good afternoon and welcome to the first meeting of Children and Family Affairs Committee. Thank you for joining us today, and if you would all stand, we're going to, Representative Bricken is going to lead us in prayer, and then we're going to say the pledge. So let's all stand, please.
Well, bow with me. Lord, thank you for this day that you've provided us. Thank you for the members that are here of this committee. Thank you for the constituents that are watching. Thank you for the audience. Lord, as we start this session, just keep us in our hearts and our minds that are doing the best for Tennessee, Lord. We struggle and we need your guidance and help. And so please be with us. Amen.
Amen. Attention, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Caitlin, would you please call the roll?
Representatives Bricken, Farmer, Gant, Garrett, Harris, Jernigan, Powell, Stevens, Chair Lady Littleton.
Here.
Chair Lady, you have a quorum.
Thank you. I'd like to start off with a few introductions, and we have a new group this year. We have some that have returned, but we have some new members as well. So we're going to go around the room and let everyone introduce themselves and tell us just something briefly or a short synopsis about themselves. So, Representative Gant.
Thank you, Chair Lady. It's a privilege to be on the committee with y'all, and I'm just fortunate to be here. Thanking God for every day I'm given. So look forward to serving. I represent District 94, which is Fayette, Hardeman, and McNairy, and this is my fourth term. So looking forward to continue to serve.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My name is Robert Stevens, and I represent District 13, which is the western fifth of Rutherford County. I'm an attorney by trade and have done some divorce and child custody work, so I'm somewhat familiar with what this committee does and look forward to hopefully adding some good things to what we do. And I was on the county commission for 12 years before I got elected to serve in the state legislature.
Very good. Chairman Farmer.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Andrew Farmer here, represent the 17th District, consists of Sevier and Jefferson counties. Have a wife, 2 kids at home, and it's allowed me to come here and serve my constituents in the state of Tennessee, and I'm looking forward to being a part of this committee, Ms. Chair Lady, and being on time. So with that said, I'll pass it on down.
Representative Jernigan.
Chair Lady, it's good to be on your committee. We came in together, Andrew and you. And Darren Jernigan, represent the Fighting 60th out there in Old Hickory and Hermitage and Donaldson. Got a wife, 4 kids. I'm a Sagittarius. I like to go to the movies and play chess. And anyway, I think I'm going to bring some value to this committee because I care about especially domestic issues. So I'm looking forward to serving on your leadership.
Representative Torrey Harris from Tennessee House District 91, Memphis, Tennessee. It's a different district number for me this time. I was in 90 and now I'm in 91, where most people know the late, great Lois D. Berry. So I get to see a whole different area of Memphis now. I have served on this committee. This is the second time now, my second term. I begged multiple times to be back on this committee, so I'm very excited about it. I love to play spades and do things with for our children back home. So foster youth and adoption is really, really important to me, and look forward to our committee this year as well as our committee dinner at some point. I'm assuming it's coming. So
Sounds like he's going to pay for it.
I'm in for that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Johnny Garrett. I represent the 45th District in Sumner County. That's White House, Gilletsville, Cottontown, and parts of Hendersonville. I've been practicing law now for 16 years, and I started out in the domestic world litigating those cases, so I am familiar with the subject matter. So looking forward, Madam Chair, to assisting you and the youth of our state and helping it make it a little bit better. I'd also like to express my displeasure, though, as my former legislative assistant, Courtney Kaufman, is now up on the dais with us as our research analyst for civil, so congratulations to her, but I'm still not happy about it.
Your loss
Thank you, Madam
is-
Chair.
Your loss is our gain. Representative Rickon.
Chair, Rush Bricken, 47th, one up from Johnny, representing Coffee and Grundy County there. And this is starting my third term, my second term on this committee, so looking forward to it. I'm a banker CPA by profession, served a long time on our county commission. My wife has successfully raised 4 kids, and we have 8 grandkids. So,
Thank you. And as you know, I am married Littleton. I don't remember how, I guess this is my maybe 4th, 6th time. I'm not sure how many times we have had, how often we've had this committee. But anyway, I'm very honored to chair it because everyone knows where my passion is. It's for the safety and the welfare of children and the families. So we work really hard on this, and our little motto is, we want to save all the children, but if we can save them one at a time, that's what we're going to do, one at a time. So it looks like we've got a good diversified group, and I look forward to working with each and every one of you. And many of you know that Caitlin Prince, she's my legislative assistant. I say she's the one with OCD, and I am not, so she keeps me straight. And we work really well together, so I think that helps me. So I'm very fortunate to have her. And of course, we have Johnny Garrett's loss in our gain. Courtney Kaufman, she's our research analyst, and we're proud to have her. And our legal group is Elizabeth and Sonia and Taylor Overton. Back here in the corner, we're in a little tight room this year, so y'all have to bear with us. And if you see me over here, it's because I'm short, and sometimes it's hard to see people over this little high thing. And Mason Hiskey will serve as our clerk. And I also would like to thank all of those that do the audio and visual for the committee, as well as our Sergeant at Arms, Tommy Woodard, who's over here. Not in the corner because he's bad, just because he needs that's the only place left here for him to sit. But anyway, I look forward to working with all of you, and I think we're going to do a lot of good things this year. And I think I announced last night that we're going to do adoption. We're going to have a calendar for all the adoption bills because I think there's going to be several. So we're kind of looking forward to that, to see what ways that we can help make adoption easier and a lot better for all, instead of just, and I think Senator Hill said it yesterday, so I'm going to go ahead and say it, cheaper for those that really want to adopt. So we feel like there'll be more babies out there, and we work closely with DCS and the nonprofits and all of the people that want to help take care of our children. So members, are there any personal orders? Okay, since there are no orders, we're going to move right along. Before we get into today's presentation, I would like to go over a few of the policies for the committee. You all have a copy of the committee's policies and procedures in your email, but we're going to go over them quickly. Committee will start promptly at 12 o'clock on Tuesdays in this hearing room 4. Bill notices must be submitted by 3:30 p.m. each Wednesday in order to be considered for the upcoming week. Following House Rule 83, the sponsor of the bill must request a roll call vote prior to any vote. The amendment deadline is 10 a.m. on Mondays or the day before the amendment is to be heard in committee. Amendments must be signed and must be submitted electronically to the corresponding email list. Voice amendments will not be entertained. Requests for testimony by guest speakers must be submitted to the committee staff no later than 24 hours prior to the scheduled meeting, and time limits may be placed on testimony and comments. That would be up to the chair. Are there any questions or concerns about these policies? And if you didn't get a copy, be sure and let Caitlin know, or Courtney, and they'll be sure and send you another one. For the first meeting of the Children and Family Affairs Committee, we will be going out of session to hear from Kristen Davis, the President and CEO of Nurture the Next. I've heard you guys several times. I'm looking forward to hearing you again. So we're going to go out of order, and if you two would please come up and introduce yourselves and who you're with for the record. Just make sure your microphone's on.
Good morning. On?
I don't
Yes.
think so.
Can you all hear me?
Yeah, I
Okay,
can now.
perfect.
So introduce yourselves and
Great. Good morning. My name is Kristen Davis, and I am the president and CEO of a statewide nonprofit, Nurture the Next. I've had the great pleasure of meeting many of you face to face in this committee before, and I'm excited to be back.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Great. I'm Jennifer Biden. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for Nurture the Next. Thanks.
So today we're excited to be with you all again. I know, as Chairman Littleman mentioned, we've been with your committee before and presented before, so we're excited to share again about some of the work that we have been doing since we last saw you last year, and the sort of the state of children in Tennessee, which many of you are probably familiar with. And we are, again, with a nonprofit called Nurture the Next. I think you have the clicker. So we are statewide and really are in existence because we believe that what we do with children now in the early years matters for the next generation of our workforce, the next generation of adults, the next generation of caregivers. And parenting attitudes and behaviors are actually set during childhood. So many of us parent the way that we were parented. And so we really exist to make sure that parents have the support and really come alongside them in the way that they best need to be able to nurture their children and raise them well. So that's our tagline is raising the next generation together. And we actually just came from a meeting with Commissioner Quinn and talked a lot about her focus and priority of ages 0 to 5 and the emphasis that she wants to place on that time period of a child's life because of early brain science, which we'll talk a little bit more about, and had a great conversation with her about how the Department of Children's Services and nonprofits like ours can work together in early prevention during those early years of a child's life. But that is not to say that we are not without significant challenges in the state of Tennessee. Many of you have probably had the chance to review the State of the Child, which is released by the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth every year. And I just want to bring up a couple of points of reference from that report as we begin and as we get started to sort of frame up the conversation that we'll have today. So children in Tennessee currently report a higher level of adversity than their counterparts across the country, which is a startling thing to think about, with 41% of Tennessee children having had experience at least one level of adversity in their young childhood. And we also know that among children in Tennessee, we have a very high poverty rate with children in our state. 1 in 19 have a cognitive difficulty, 1 in 80 have a self-care difficulty, 1 in 100 have a vision difficulty, 1 in 125 have an ambulatory difficulty, and 1 in 165 have a hearing difficulty. So when you relate all of the challenges that children are facing and overlay poverty as an element on top of that, we know that we have a lot of work to do to place emphasis on our very young children. We really exist because we believe parenting matters, and we believe, again, that what we do with parents actually sets the future foundation of children now. And we are here to create a future for children filled with the promise of prosperity. And when you think about what prosperity means to you and what it means to your family, that is what we want for all Tennesseans, beginning now in the early years of childhood. And we want to see all children in this state thriving in safe and nurturing environments and communities. We really think of what we do now, and one of the things that we talked with the commissioner about is prevention. We know what works. And it's not a matter of trying to figure that out. We know that we can prevent child abuse and neglect in the early years of a child's life if we implement the programs that have the evidence behind them and that are supported and well documented. So that's really where we place the emphasis of our work, is implementation in Tennessee of programs that we know are effective in keeping kids out of the system to begin with, and trying to make sure that kids don't ever have to interface with the Department of Children's Services when possible. So we do this in three main buckets. We have hands-on support for families through home visiting programs. We do create lasting impacts by working with parents and their children, so 2 generations at one time, parent and child together. And then also changing the landscape for families through advocacy and education. I'll go into a little bit more and with Jen's help to support more about those programs and what they look like. I first want to talk about the science of why we do what we do. So many of you are probably familiar with the study related to adverse childhood experiences and the brain science behind what happens in the brain when a child experiences trauma, especially in the early years of life, that 0 to 5 time period when brain wiring is occurring. So much like the foundation of a house, the brain is built by creating that wiring early on and getting the framing right. And we know that if we do that right, just like building a house, that it's cheaper in the long run to get it right from the start than it is to have to fix issues later. So if we think about supporting healthy brain development, there was actually a study that was done on adults who had experienced adversity in very young childhood. They actually looked at the ages between 0 and 18, but knowing that 0 to 5 is really a critical period of development, and found that if a child has experienced abuse, neglect, or household dysfunction, so household dysfunction including things like living with an adult with mental illness, having a caregiver that is incarcerated, knowing that you've been witness to family violence or domestic violence and intimate partner violence in your home, living with someone who is struggling with substance abuse, or living in a broken home where 2 parents are not present. Those are the household dysfunction things, and the abuse inclusive of emotional, physical, and sexual abuse. That if you experience any of these things in very young childhood, while you don't have the specific vivid memories to recount it, sometimes we do depending on the age that it happened, your body definitely remembers that, because it's inlaid into your trauma response and it's inlaid into your DNA, which can then pass on to the next generation of kids. So what we really want to do is make sure that we can prevent those things from ever happening in the first place. So we do this, again, through some of our programming, which I'm actually going to let Jennifer talk a little bit more about, but programming in homes with families where we're building the parenting skills necessary to create nurturing attachments and create safety for kids, reaching both of those generations at once, working in the homes and with parents and their children together, because we know the caregivers are the folks in a child's life that have the ability to make the biggest, longest-term impact, and partnering with other agencies and business to do this work. So I'll turn it over to her to talk a little bit more about our programs.
With Healthy Families America, Healthy Families Tennessee, you may hear of it, is our largest evidence-based program where we serve families directly. There is a really large federal and a significant state investment in evidence-based home visiting that many providers receive, because there is a lot of data over longitudinal studies to show that there is a high return on the investment. When we can get in with moms when they're pregnant or right when they find out they're pregnant, we can really change the trajectory of that family's life in a 2-generation approach. So they're weekly visits to the family, connecting them with resources in their local communities they need, providing them with that solid foundation of parenting, and really being a support system, because parents want to do the best they can for their kids. They just need those concrete supports to do that. So currently in the state of Tennessee, we are actually, we have evidence, not Nurture the Next itself, but with our partner provider agencies. Evidence-based home visiting is now offered in 91 out of 95 counties, a huge upscale in the past year and a half to 2 years, from like 54 up to 91. we're still only reaching 2.1% of the eligible population in this state with evidence-based home visiting services. So there is still a critical need. We are improving by leaps and bounds with being able to offer those things. And we can stay with the family up to 5 years. So the outcomes are great. 98% of families in our programs and in evidence-based home visiting programs do not have a substantiated case of child abuse. We track that every year as we get the data. They also have access, or they have a better chance of having access to job training, to economic independence, and to having things like medical providers, being up to date on vaccines, and enrolling children in school and preparing them for that school readiness piece. So there are many other programs, but the highlight I think today is going to be on evidence-based home visiting because it's the largest, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to you about those other programs some other time.
So really, we believe, again, that parenting is a skill that is passed from one generation to the next. And setting that early foundation now improves the lives of families for years to come, so that what we are doing today creates a long-lasting ripple impact effect for the future of our entire state. And as Jennifer mentioned, creating lots of opportunities for economic advantages and skill sets, which is another reason why, as we talk with business owners, this is something that they are investing more in, because they know if they want a future workforce that comes to work ready and prepared, starting in early childhood is where we need to begin. We really believe in reaching 2 generations at once because children don't raise themselves. Children are raised by the adults in their lives, and Chairman Littleton, you talked earlier about foster care and adoptive care. We really believe that adults are not just biological parents. While that is the focus of the population that we work with, adults in a child's life can be foster parents, adoptive parents, teachers, caregivers, early childhood educators, family members, neighbors, which is why we want to create that community investment. Everyone should have a hand in making sure that kids are raised well and raised in safe and stable, loving environments, but especially the people who are responsible for their day-to-day care. So reaching those 2 generations at once is really critical to the success of that child in the long run. Next. Mm-hmm. As I mentioned, partnering with agencies and business is a critical piece of what we do because we want to have a future generation with a ready workforce, a workforce that's well educated, who shows up ready and able to work. And I know that many of you on this committee have had a big investment in making sure that Tennessee has those advantages as a state, that we are moving the path along in our education systems, that we are moving the path along in higher education, and really having a solid workforce. We also know that those things can't happen without the investment of 0 to 5. So early quality child care education is not just something that we do just because kids need a place to go while their parents work. But during those early years of brain development, it is really, really critical that they have access to early to quality child care in that way. So partnering with agencies and businesses is a critical component of making sure that that happens, because when kids do well, our entire state, in turn, reaps the benefits of that. So if you, let's go to the next slide. If you want to talk, forward.
Forward.
If you want to find us, here is where we can be found. We can be found on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Also do want to make mention that one of the things that we're bolstering in the next year, we actually work with parents who have been involved in programming to be the authentic voice of what they feel like programming needs to look like in the state of Tennessee. So working with parents and caregivers who've had involvement in various levels of systems, training them on how to become leaders in their own community so that they can influence local policy, organizations, and then hopefully have a chance to talk with all of you about their experiences in a way that really helps us know what parents in our state need. So you'll be hearing more from us in that way. So we're happy to answer questions. And again, we'd like to thank you all so much for your time on this committee and for allowing us to be with you today.
Thank you very much for being here. And I love hearing the prevention. I've preached that for a long time. And I think we're all in agreement that we have to start at the beginning before we can fix the problem and keep it from just generation after generation. So that's dear to my heart that we do face, except that we've got to go to prevention. Then we won't need all the juvenile justice thing. Right. So yes, so that is so good to hear. So I have a couple of questions, then we'll open it up for questions. How do you choose which mothers go into your program?
So our parents come to us from all over. We have programming in every county. So we have relationships with other providers, nonprofits, hospitals, agencies. In our more rural communities where the resources are a little more slim, we get a lot of word of mouth referrals. Some parents will self-refer. We have parents that will reach out to us and say, I'm a new mom and I have no idea what I'm doing, but I know that the way I grew up probably wasn't the healthiest and I need some coaching and support and modeling. So it really comes from all over. We're seeing an increase in our referrals recently, which is good because it means that the word is getting out about these services and this types of programming.
So I live in Dixon. So how would a young mother or a pregnant lady find you guys in Dixon?
So if we don't serve a specific county with evidence-based home visiting, there is probably, like I said, there's 91. There's probably another provider that does. So the best way is to probably go to the Department of Health's website and look at the map. Like if you're making a referral, you're trying to direct someone, and reach out directly to that agency. But you bring up an excellent point about making the knowledge and the availability of these services ubiquitous to people, because they don't always know how to find these services or that these services exist. And that's been one of our major challenges in terms of getting into homes of folks that do want the support. So there is the Department of Health has a map where whatever county you live in, you click on that county and it'll show you the provider of all of the different services. And all of the programs are voluntary. Evidence-based home visiting is 100% voluntary, so folks can self-refer into those programs. Okay. You could also reach out to us, and we'll direct you exactly where you need to go and do a warm introduction for you.
I've lived there a long time, and I've known about you for a long time, but I wouldn't know where to go without knowing you guys in Dixon. So I guess maybe that's something that we need to think about, how we can help you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we work very diligently to create effective partnerships with other organizations and medical providers who do have access to pregnant and parenting a range of ages and challenges, so that they know that we exist, so that when they are interacting with a parent who they think could benefit from extra support, they can also refer into our programs as well. So it is a challenge to make sure everybody knows about us, and that we market our services well to parents and that they have access to those.
So one last question, and it's over. I don't mean to hammer you about it, but so do doctors, like OB doctors, do they have pamphlets or something to recommend? Or
Yes, so we've worked to create partnership with pediatricians and obstetricians and grow those, because we call them warm handoffs. You know, if you have an obstetrician or a pediatrician who recommends something to you, more than likely you're able to listen to that because you had that partnership with that medical provider. So we have worked with individual medical providers and systems to make sure that they have access to referral and have materials in their waiting rooms as necessary and as they'll allow, and make sure that they have the ability to tell parents about our programming.
But you bring up an excellent point. Since you brought it up, I would love to talk about having more of a unified system statewide in birthing hospitals, where it is much easier for these providers that might see these pregnant moms before anyone else to have a really easy way to access local services and make those referrals. And obviously, especially in the age of what we've kind of been through health-wise in the last few years, I think that hospitals have a lot of priorities, but it would be great to work on those systems level kind of auto referrals to providers of evidence-based home visiting for at-risk or vulnerable populations specifically. So we would love to do some work around that as well.
Okay, thank you. Representative Garrett, did you have a question? You're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you all very much for your presentation. You said a statistic that got me thinking about this question, and you actually asked some of my questions is how in the world do people know about you? And it seems like that may be a little bit of a difficult way to market your services. You said 2.1% of folks are eligible for your services. So my question is the 97.9% that are not. How do we identify those folks that are eligible but then don't have your services? What does that look like?
Yeah. So it used to be 2.9% of the eligible population, and the number has actually gone down of numbers that are being served. But depending on the evidence-based home visiting program, so there are home visiting programs. When we talk about evidence-based home visiting programs, we're talking about ones that are eligible to receive like federal and state funding because they have a long history of outcomes that work, and so we know that there's a return on those state or federal dollars. And there is a tool that is used to assess fitness for program. So a family may want or need support, but it may not be at the intensity of the level that an evidence-based home visiting program offers. There's something shorter term, there's something less intense. That is, you bring up, again, I think getting back to my little plug about hospitals, I think that that's the exact point, is that these resources that are so important are available, but getting that knowledge in the hands of the folks that have the ability to make the referrals and that already have those pre-existing trusting relationships with folks that can say, this is a voluntary, wonderful program. This is not because you're a bad parent or because you don't want the best for your child or any of those things. It's more about this is going to help build a very healthy brain development and a very healthy bonding with your child. So that is the work left to be done. The programs work. The families love them. And they really have remarkable outcomes and like you said, can really change the trajectory of this state. It's just getting the information out there that they exist and connecting folks with them. It is challenging because it's not like you're going to turn on the TV and see an ad for evidence-based home visiting and make a call. You really have to have the ability to connect people in a way that's trusting and that they're going to want to make that call or have that referral.
Can I just piggyback one
Sure.
thing? We mentioned earlier that the programming has grown in terms of the number of counties that it is available in, but I will mention that there is still infrastructure building to be done around that because while it's available in every county, sometimes that looks like one or two people per county providing the service. So as you can imagine, that's not enough to reach that eligible population because of the infrastructure that is in place currently. So while we are so proud that it has reached 91 counties as opposed to the previous 54, we also know that there's infrastructure building to be done to create more opportunities for families to engage because of availability.
How long did it take you to go from 54 to 91 counties?
So interestingly, we were really, our agency is a piece of the 91, so there are other organizations who provide evidence-based home visiting in addition to ours. Evidence-based home visiting as a whole was really fortunate in that when the temporary assistance for needy families dollars were being allocated for use for TANF eligible families, the Department of Health saw that as an opportunity to expand evidence-based home visiting, utilizing those dollars that were available. So we were really fortunate that evidence-based home visiting programmatically was able to grow because of that funding made available to that. So it was a quick expansion, I will say, because of the availability of those funds. So we're very grateful and gracious that those are in existence to support it, but realizing that there's more opportunity to continue to grow that infrastructure.
Okay. Last one.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Very, very good. Thank you. Now I lost my train of thought, but my question is there mechanism or programs if if you're a new mom or a new dad, we don't know what we're doing, right? When that baby gets here, it's like, what am I supposed to do here, right? You don't always want to admit that. So if someone actually needs your services and doesn't know it, but there's signs that are there, what's available to that OB or whomever they're going to the first time they realize that they're pregnant and they need these services or whatnot, but they may not know it themselves.
Right.
What do you all to combat that? I mean, I know you can't just say, hey, we're going to send someone to their house because we think you need this, then they're going to potentially be insulted, right? No, I don't. I'm perfectly fine, but they're really not. What signs are out there that shows that those folks can use your services when they may not realize they need them?
Sure. So I think a lot of that is really lends itself to the skill set of the providers.
Okay.
Because they are very skilled and trained in creating quick rapport with a family in a way that is not condemning or insulting or makes them feel like they have done something wrong. I think that a lot of that is because we know parenting is hard, and we are really working in our messaging and in our public awareness to help parents realize that asking for help actually is a good thing. That, we wouldn't hesitate to ask for help if we had a medical issue or our child needed to have medicine. We would ask for help. Parenting is the same. Parenting is not something that we're born to know how to do, that it's a skill that's created. So the other thing I will say is that our programs and evidence-based home visiting as a whole, that the premise of it is that it's a strengths-based program. So building on the strengths that a parent does have, instead of saying, you don't have this, you don't have this, you don't have this, that's why you need our services. But instead, talking about what they do have in place that's effective and helpful and working, and talking about this as a way to boost them even more and coach them in a way that they can make their own decisions about their family. I know that that's a pretty ambiguous way to describe what we do, but we talk a lot about if we can meet face-to-face with a parent once, that often that's all we need to talk with them about the way that we can serve them, because they haven't had a lot of experience where they've had a provider come in and say, well, you're doing all of these things wrong and I'm here to fix it. And that's not how we operate at all. So, but getting that first meeting is the biggest barrier to getting over that hump. So sometimes we'll just say, just meet with us once. Mm-hmm. That's all we want is one time. And often that's the best hook that we need.
Good deal. Thank you all very much. I appreciate that.
Can I add, so Kristen mentioned earlier about our work engaging parents in the advocacy and in looking at programs. And another thing that we have really discovered is that peer encouragement and peer support is the number one motivator for folks for destigmatizing anything. So we feel like we really cannot do this work unless we are empowering parents, either parents that are currently in our programs, have been in our programs, the businesses that want to, rally around this and really get them to be forward-facing and say, kids don't come with instructions, babies don't come with instructions. Parenting is not always just something you give birth, or you're a new dad or you're a new parent and suddenly everything is clear and like the directions are on the wall and this is hard. It's hard, and we all need some kind of support. So really that peer engagement piece, I think, is something we're focusing more and more on, and it's going to get at exactly some of the things that you were just mentioning in terms of some of those challenges and obstacles.
Good deal. Thank you very much. Madam Chair, thank you very much.
Representative Brigham.
Get turned on. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Again, good to see y'all. Enjoy y'all's presentation from last year. A couple of questions, certainly, and I'll always start off, I think I said last year, if we could invent a good parenting pill, we would sell the hell out of them. But first of all, your all's funding, and how much of your work is all those home visits volunteer parents? But talk about your funding and the number of volunteers you have, and
and are they all volunteers?
Sure. So I agree about the good parenting pill. So we like to think that that's what we are. So we actually, all of our team members who provide services to families are paid staff. They are highly trained in creating relationships with families. They're highly trained in methodology of prevention. And understanding how to relate to parents and children. They have a solid expertise in brain development and how to engage parents and children together in brain development. So they are all paid staff in our home visiting and home-based programs. A lot of our parents that have been in programs come back to volunteer with us but they're doing it in a way that is helping talk to parents on the front end and create messaging that is, as Jennifer mentioned, effective in engaging parents. But the home visiting programs are all provided by paid staff. The funding is interesting because it's a lot of things collectively together. So we do have contracts with the Department of Health that are specific to evidence-based home visiting. Some of that originates federally through things like the Maternal Infant Early Childhood Home Visiting Act, which is a federal act that supplies funding for home visiting across the country. Some of it is state funding that is allocated in the governor's budget, and some of it is through the temporary assistance for needy families that I mentioned earlier that's allocated to evidence-based home visiting. So it's a lot of different pots of funding that flow through the Department of Health. We also do private fundraising as well. So we rely heavily on businesses, individuals, and donors to supply funding to the programming that we provide, not just in cash support, but also in in-kind support. So things like diapers and material goods for families who may need them. That's for home visiting specifically. We do have other programs that we didn't talk as much in depth about today that are funded through places like the Department of Children's Services because they have funding that also originates federally through the Children's Trust Fund that's allocated specific to prevention. So it's sort of lots of things that fold together.
You mentioned, and I was going to ask about DCS. Obviously, cases that they are involved probably are already tough situations, but are they a source of referrals to y'all for parenting guidance for their clients?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes to both. So we really try to keep our focus upstream before a child and a family is identified by the Department of Children's Services as needing their services, especially in terms of investigative services. We do, however, work in tandem with DCS, especially in counties that have things like safe baby courts, where we're able to take referrals for those families who are working to maintain custody of their very young children, and we can be sort of an enhancement to some of the other program that they may be receiving through the Department of Children's Services or places like safe baby courts. We also have, from time to time, served teen parents who are in state's custody and foster care themselves. So the teenager is the child in custody, and they are raising their child. So we have some unique situations in that regard as well. And I don't know if you want to add to that.
You answered that perfectly.
Yeah. Just for the committee, I just looked on the site, and I try to extrapolate this a little bit. Roughly 80,000 births in Tennessee a year. So that means about 400,000 under 5, not counting people that are coming into Tennessee. Now, big numbers, and and I'm sure all those aren't at risk for parenting needs, but there's got to be a solid percent. I don't know if it's 20% or y'all have a percent of what y'all think of that population needs parenting assistance or guidance or training or whatever. But obviously, if you're only reaching 2% of that, that's just hardly getting there. So.
Yeah, so we are of the belief that every new parent needs support in some form. It looks different, and obviously we do not have the resources to provide support to every single parent in the same way. But even if it is just these are the resources available in the community. These are parenting support groups. These are new parent groups. Every parent, I think, again, normalizing this idea regardless of income level, of ethnic or racial background, of geography, every new parent needs some kind of support. And more than anything, I think our education is really around normalizing that, because until you can destigmatize this idea, you're not going to do the prevention side, because the folks are not going to reach out for the help. So there is a big need. And when we're looking at calculating sort of what the percentages are in math and doing those calculations, we do look at the live births based on the census in every county. And we try to think, if we can look at the county stats in terms of poverty and things like that, we can come up with a pretty solid formula of what percentage of that population would be eligible and deeply benefit from these types of services, no matter who the provider is there. So the math is there, and the outcomes that we know we'll have are there. What's different in every community, I think, is the challenges of that community. Oftentimes, our services are home-based, so it gets over a lot of the obstacles of transportation and childcare and things like that. But some of these counties are, it's an hour to get from one side to the other. So just those types of things. But yes, we definitely hope that we can serve more in the future.
Let me just wrap up. I mean, are y'all needing anything from the legislature or the administration specifically? And is there any legislation specifically that's going to be supporting y'all this year?
So I'll go back to something that was mentioned earlier, specific to building systems of infrastructure to allow parents to engage in our programs, especially when it comes to birthing hospitals and medical systems. And that's something that we are having a lot of good conversation with the Department of Health about, really around how can we integrate referral into home visiting better into hospital systems across the state. So I think that that's something that we're going to continue to talk with DOH about as we move forward in this session. The other thing I will say that I think, again, coming from having met with Commissioner Quinn this morning, is really thinking about how we focus good policy on specifically on ages 0 to 5 and boosting prevention services, especially during that really critical window of brain development and child development. And so any ability to go into adding resources and infrastructure around those things, I think we'll be able to have good conversation about as well. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? I guess not. Thank you, ladies, very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank y'all for being here. So we're going back into session. And before I adjourn, I would like to let everyone know that next week we will be having an adoption and foster care panel come. So come and pay attention, bring your questions. We've got a lot to learn. And we will also be hearing from the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth. They'll be having their State of the Child presentation for us too. So there's a lot to learn and a lot to do. So thank y'all for being here today, and seeing no further business without objection, we're adjourned.